Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome to the Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan podcast, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's episode. I'm a bilingual neurolinguistic programming and cognitive behavior psychotherapist specializing in anger management issues, both court-appointed and private, marriage counseling using the EFT method, dissociative disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, depression, anxiety, dream analysis, and also provide life, business, and retirement coaching support. I provide individual one-on-one session in both French or English, and also do group settings. If you need any assistance, reach out to DMV Therapy and Coaching Services at 301-325-1550. And our website can be found at lifecoachddanamzallag.com. Today, I'm very excited to have for our third episode of season 14, a very special guest and happiness advocate expert, Matt Zeman. And just like every of my past episode, I will leave it up to the guests to properly introduce themselves, as no one can do a better job. Matt, the floor is yours.
Dan, I appreciate that. Thank you for having me on today. I'm looking forward to having this discussion, and I appreciate what you do with your happiness journey. It's exciting.
Thank you very much. So, what made you become a happiness advocate, especially something that you and we have so much passion for?
So much. So there's a couple different things. On I have a nonprofit I'm involved with called Take 2 Minutes.
Mhm.
And a good friend of mine had started sending text messages to his son to give him encouragement, to try to turn his mind towards the positive. And it went from some messages to his son's friends, to growing from there. And I wanted to get involved with him to help bring his service out to more people with evidence-based activities. So that led to Take 2 Minutes. And then on the psychedelic front, I had a personal experience with psychedelic medicine about 4 years ago that completely changed my worldview. And I realized that this is an incredibly powerful technology that can be used to disrupt negative patterns and behaviors, and help people act as a catalyst towards happiness. Doesn't do the work for you, but it can help get you in the right direction. So for me, it was a huge change. And I ended up going back to school and getting a master's in psychology and neuroscience after that, and just found it to be incredible. So I love this happiness journey that you're on, that I'm on, and hopefully we're all on.
Absolutely. And thank you again so much for being on the show. I think your vision and my vision actually helps people be able to find at least an ounce of happiness, especially in this very difficult world that we live in. So tell me a little bit more about the psychedelic approach that you're having in this, because people will think that, is it like medication that's just going to bring you to cloud nine, or what is it exactly?
So there's a number of different psychedelic medicines that are out there. So let's start with the one that's legal for all of us here in the United
Okay.
States, which is ketamine.
Okay.
So ketamine is legal in all 50 states. It's approved by the FDA. It is not approved by the FDA for mental health, but it is widely used for that. So if you go to your doctor, psychiatrist, and say, I would like to try ketamine, you can have a doctor prescribe that for you.
Mhm.
What happens with ketamine, like all the other classic psychedelics, is it helps detach the you from you. And you can look at things without shame, blame, or guilt, or without that inner narrator telling you that, oh, you are bad or you did something wrong. Um, it, yeah, so it quiets down your default mode network. It creates what's new neuron or connections that you might not have had connected for quite a while. As we get older, we all kind of get into repetitive thought patterns, and behind the scenes, our neurons are doing the same thing. So a psychedelic experience, including ketamine, can disrupt that. There can be a spiritual component. Many people who use a psychedelic medicine will say they connected to a higher power, whatever that means to them, and that in itself can be a great source of relief, and the idea that they are maybe not alone in this world might be new for some people. So that's also a powerful way that the psychedelic works. So on the legal side, we have ketamine, and then on the not yet legal here in the United States, we have MDMA and psilocybin, and both are in phase 3 trials right now, showing incredible promise for all sorts of things around depression, anxiety, eating disorders, OCD, substance use. I expect MDMA to be legal here within the next 2 years, and psilocybin within a year or two after.
Wow. So is it what they've been doing with CBD? with cannabis making it legal. So do you think that the MDMA will become like a part of a supplement versus a medication that needs to be prescribed?
No, I don't think that. So CBD and the cannabis movement had kind of two different branches. They had a recreational branch and a medicinal branch. MDMA is really hyper focused on the medicinal side. So they've been doing the phase 3 trials have all been with veterans and or people with post traumatic stress disorder, treatment resistant post traumatic stress disorder. So think about veterans, first responders, victims of sexual assault. What's incredible that the data shows is with just 3 treatments of MDMA, these people who were completely treatment resistant to everything else, 67% no longer qualified as having PTSD.
Wow.
It's a huge number. So yeah, that the FDA gave them breakthrough therapy designation. The second part of the phase 3 trial just finished, and while the actual data itself has not been released yet, they did say it reached statistical relevance or significance. So that's really exciting. Psilocybin is another word for that is magic mushrooms, and we're seeing really incredible results with people with terminal illnesses. And unlike an antidepressant, the where you have to take it for 6 to 14 weeks to find out if it even works for you, where you're going to have a many people have very high side effect profiles with antidepressants. And then if it doesn't work, you've got to go try something else. And in upwards of 40% of the population, they just don't work, period. Psilocybin is showing to work, showing really high efficacy. So what happens if with these terminal patients in these studies is in hours, not weeks or months, they're getting relief from depression and anxiety. They're finding that happiness again. They're seeing potential that there might be something else out there. They're feeling more connected to their families. It's really powerful. And again, the FDA gave psilocybin breakthrough therapy designation as well. So on our quest for happiness, these are two very promising medicines that are around the corner for us here in the States, where we don't have to travel to another country or go to an underground provider to partake in.
So what would it take around 2 years to be able to release something that they know already works? Why is it just mostly political? Is it mostly like pharmaceutical company that cannot provide that supplement or that medicine that quickly? What is the holdback?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, Dr. Dan. I mean, the process to get a medicine approved in the States is it's a long and expensive process. For example, MDMA, Rick Doblin and the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies started this process in the 80s. They've raised well over $150 million to go through this process of getting MDMA legalized or re-legalized, I should say. It was legal. Um, and it's a massive process. Same with psilocybin. What I think is happening is it's challenging for it has been historically challenging for pharmaceutical companies to say, well, how do we make money on this?
Yeah.
If psilocybin's found in nature, how do we make sure our psilocybin and our processes or ways are profitable? And therefore, it's been hard to get the research dollars put in. Um, but yeah, it's and even now when we have all this data in front of us, it's saying like this is really incredible. We have millions of people living with PTSD who could help. We're still another 2 years away from this process. So it's a frustrating part with the medical model. There's a decriminalization model where we're seeing that across the country with chapters of what's called Decrim Nature,
Okay.
and they're out there saying we don't want to wait for medical. Nature shouldn't be illegal, period. And they're asking the voters to vote and say make this decriminalized. So that's the lowest part of law enforcement that individuals have the right. Colorado is probably the latest success story where they just passed a ballot initiative for the state to decriminalize 5 psychedelic medicines and then create a framework for a medical model. Oregon did that a couple of years ago. And then we're seeing multiple cities, Washington, D.C., Ann Arbor, Santa Cruz, just to name a few, doing similar efforts.
But I caught something that you said, which is not really reinserting to the market. So it was legal before it was taken out, and now they're going to bring it back in. So what was the reason it was taken out in the first place?
Yeah, so if we have to go kind of back to the Nixon administration,
Okay.
And we had at that time we had a pretty big anti-war left movement, and we had a lot of activity in the Black community around civil rights. And the Nixon administration chose drugs as a way to infiltrate both groups. So they passed what was called the Controlled Substances Act of 1970, and then used that as a way to crack down. And we saw incarceration go on a massive upswing. For
Okay.
any of us born kind of 1971 and later, all we've known is prohibition. So when we didn't think about it that way, though, when we were watching the Just Say No commercials in the 80s and watching the egg in the frying pan, we just thought that was our government telling us, wow, be careful. Like, these drugs are bad. There's no medicinal use. They're going to fry our brains. It never occurred to us that that this was propaganda, or that this wasn't based on science. It didn't occur to me. I bought into it. I was not a drug user at all. But turns out none of that was really based on science. There's a lot of, when you look at how drugs are scheduled, when we look at things like alcohol and the danger to self and the danger to others that this very legal, widely available drug is, compared to mushrooms, which has no lethal dose. It's a night and day comparison.
So is that where they came from, the the commercial with the egg in a frying pan? It was psychedelic mostly, or it was just a typical cocaine or heroin or any other of those drugs?
I think it was everything at the time. It was just say no to drugs, period. And at least in where I grew up, it was all drugs. They didn't tell us that, well, there are some drugs that are way worse than other drugs. It was all drugs are bad, all drugs can't help you. And it's really hard to combat 50 years of propaganda and tell people like, whoa, 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 no, no one gets addicted to mushrooms. It doesn't happen. No one's brain is fried. No one dies. Um, yeah, it's hard to combat that 50 years of false learning.
So now why does science get involved? I mean, the medical community, now that they see some kind of benefit, like for example, marijuana, they will help with those who have cataracts and other, other illnesses and all. So now if they insert psychedelic medicine into the equation, and for people to be able to, or doctors to be able to prescribe it, um, they don't know the long-term effect here, Matt. I mean, when we're talking about usage, and again, people overuse whatever drug they're in, especially that's why they stopped the opioids epidemic that happened, and now the doctors do not prescribe any more opioid medication, Vicodin, oxytocin, and all. So why do you feel this will be different?
So interestingly, there are long-term studies. They're just on illegal use, but millions of people have chosen to use psychedelic medicine for a long time. Um, and they're continuing to study what is a long-term effect. There
Okay.
are over 300 academic institutions either studying psychedelics or psychedelic centers today. So that's a lot. And these are not kind of fly-by-night universities. We're talking about Johns Hopkins, University of California, San Francisco,
There's
Yale, um, University of Alabama, University of Wisconsin, Madison. Here where I live, University of North Carolina received a $27 million grant from the Department of Defense to uh, study removing the hallucinogenic property from psychedelic compounds, and then Duke had announced a psychedelic center. So I mean, it's the science is catching up,
Mhm.
and I think people need to or really should, as you any relationship with a drug, um, people should understand what they're getting involved with, whether that's caffeine or
Yes,
alcohol or tobacco or a psychedelic medicine. And the difference between medicine and poison is dose. So
yes.
knowing where are you getting your medicine, what are you actually taking, how much of it are you taking, at what frequency are you taking, those same questions are asked with psychedelics as they are with any other medicine. But as people are pursuing um, happiness, as what we're talking about here in this podcast, this is there is an opportunity here to use this technology to potentially unlock people in a way that other technologies might not have before this.
But then if you look if you look at the concept of happiness, happiness is not a destination, it's a journey. That's what we call this show, the happiness journey. So if people use psychedelic, would that, and then the effect of it diminishes, and they're going to feel again depressed. So this is just basically a band-aid. It's not really like curing the actual depression. I mean, so they're going to constantly have to be on that psychedelic medication to be able to always sustain that high or that so-called happiness. Is it something that they could sustain for life?
So I see what you're saying with that. So we all are kind of used to the antidepressant model, which is I'm having depression or experiencing depression or anxiety. Give me some medicine. I'm going to take it every day, and the medicine is going to numb the pain. With the psychedelics, I wouldn't think of it that way. Think of psychedelics more as a catalyst for change. So on one day, you're going to take a psychedelic medicine. So if you do ketamine, it'd be maybe 6 times within 6 weeks. You're gonna use this medicine. If it's something else, maybe you just do it once or twice. Um, but you take this medicine, and in many cases, for whatever reason, your brain starts to get rewired, um, and you start to see things in a different way. And just that, whether it's 1 hour with ketamine or 6 hours or 8 hours with psilocybin, just that single experience can help many people start a new direction. And that new direction can be what we call integration work. So it can be everything from meditation or mindfulness practices to journaling, about gratitude practices, loving kindness practices, all sorts of different things that they can do to continue to reinforce the lessons that they saw with that moment of the psychedelic medicine. But the psychedelic medicine is, I would not think of it as a cure or cure all. It is it's a catalyst for change, and then the real work actually starts after the psychedelic medicine experience is over.
So would you say
Um,
it's like the movie Fast and Furious when they connect the nitro pumps into the car, when they give that boost, that is the boost that gives them to be able to win. But after that, when that boost is over, are they going to be sustaining that effort or that change that they want to be able to accomplish different goals in their lives?
Yep. And that's the big question. And the hope is that the psychedelic experience, depending on which medicine you choose and how you take it, gives you enough of a kickstart that it's like, oh, okay, I do want to make change in my life. I can see where to make the change. I have the motivation to make the change, and I can go and do it. And then maybe don't ever need to take a psychedelic medicine again, or maybe every once in a while you do this. I think there's one other piece I want to add in here, which is a spiritual component. For many people, when they have a psychedelic experience, they're going to say, I connected with something bigger than myself,
Okay.
whatever that is for them. Um, that is also a reason people continue at some point with psychedelics. So for them, it's a sacrament. It's communing with this higher power. So
Okay.
maybe they say once a quarter, once a year, once every 5 years, once every 10 years, I want to have that communion with my higher power. And that's part of my happiness journey.
Okay.
There are I think that's an interesting additional component in addition to the biochemical social components of the psychedelic.
So, for example, if those were actually dealing with ADHD and they have to take Adderall, or those with depression, they have to use Wellbutrin and all. So this is something that it's not consistent. They just have to, with the moment that they feel like they are lost in their lives for some reason or another, they will use a psychedelic medication to be able to give them this enlightenment or, I mean, I don't know, just like open their eyes or this awakening moment. But then after that, don't most people love to be in that situation for the moment to be able to start making a massive change in their life? So they would want to go back into that feeling, which will create some kind of addiction to it.
What the research shows with both animals and humans is that most psychedelics are actually anti-addictive. So people who take a psilocybin or ayahuasca, a high dose of psilocybin or ayahuasca, they're not rushing to go back to that medicine. They're going to continue to hit the food button versus the drug button.
Okay.
Um, there are some medicines that do have addictive tendencies in recreational use. So, for example, ketamine, again, our only legal option here in America, both in animal studies and then humans in recreational use have been known to become addicted to ketamine. So if you're hearing this and it's like, oh, I've heard ketamine's good for my brain, I heard ketamine's good for my depression or anxiety, and then you're at a party and someone's offers you ketamine, that's a dangerous way to experience that medicine. In clinical use under a doctor's care, um, where they're controlling the source of the medicine, they're controlling the dose of the medicine, they're controlling the route of administration, meaning whether it's an IV or a shot, or whether it's a lozenge or a nasal spray, and they're controlling the frequency. There hasn't been addiction in clinical use. So again, I think any medicine can be abused. The goal is to have a process to have as least likelihood of abuse as possible. And I think the clinics and the telehealth providers doing working with ketamine today, for the most part, they have good guardrails put in. And then for those who are going to the um, ceremonial uh, ceremonial ways of ingesting psychedelics, whether that's underground here in the States or it's legal in another country. Um, Again, it's typically not something people want to rush back and do a second or third time right away. And I don't think anyone would say, if I'm doing something every 3 months or every 6 months or every year or every 5 years, that's really an addiction or a substance use challenge.
Yeah,
These are,
right.
yeah, for the most part, people who are paying their taxes, living their lives, having their family life, doing their jobs, and they're not having a substance use challenge.
Beautiful. So if let's say it does help with PTSD and other of those symptoms, do you think that the military or the Department of Defense will try to push it forward to be able to accelerate it to become legal into the country so they could prescribe this to all those who actually are veterans, Army veterans or Navy, whatever it is, to be able to help them cope with those PTSD symptoms?
Yeah, this is something I didn't know. I just assumed this was going to be like the liberal, hippie, fringe side would be supporting this. And what I've come to learn is that there are so many veterans and first responders that are suffering with treatment resistant post traumatic stress disorder, and the data is so compelling that this is getting support on both sides of the aisle. We saw recently a Rand Paul Cory Booker legislation proposed nationally. We're seeing state after state. This isn't a Democrat issue or Republican issue. It's both sides. And then we're also, interestingly, not just seeing it with politicians, we're seeing it with donors. There are high net worth donors that are conservative and high net worth donors that are liberal that are donating to psychedelic medicine causes. Because again, everybody's pretty united around the idea that people who are living with depression, anxiety, PTSD, um, with 40% of antidepressants not working, or antidepressants not working in 40% of the population, we need something else. And there is a medicine out there that appears to be able to do quite a lot of good. So it's really exciting to see how much support this is getting from both sides of the aisle.
So in your journey, like when you help people find their way to reaching happiness, do you automatically incorporate psychedelic in the process, or do you try to figure out exactly their what they're struggling with, what they're dealing with at this given moment, and what is the best course of action for them?
Yeah, I mean, I try to meet people where they are, depending on and where they meet me. So there's some people who find me through Take 2 Minutes, and that's all text based, positive psychology activities with no other technology other than those. Some people find me through Happy with two Y's. And this is a telehealth company working with doctors who are prescribing ketamine and also connecting members to guides who can help them prepare and integrate their journeys. And then Happy also provides digital therapeutics to to the members to help them continue their happiness journey.
Mhm.
And then some people reach out to me on LinkedIn or Instagram, and just have questions, and I'm happy to answer whatever their questions are. A lot of times it's, I'm taking XYZ medicine. Will that interact with whatever psychedelic they're thinking about taking? And in those cases, in a lot of those cases, I'll direct them to people like the Spirit Pharmacist, who is a PharmD specializing in psychedelic medicines. And he'll say, oh, you're taking this, that, and the other thing. Yes, you're safe. No, you're not safe. You need to taper down, you need to abstain, or yes, you can do this, that, or the other thing. And yeah, he can provide a level of uh, of assistance that I can't. So I view myself more as a bridge
Okay.
of an informational bridge for different people, depending on what questions they have.
So, what do you say about the future of psychedelic? I mean, you said in 2 years we're supposed to see the MDMA to be approved, etc. Do you think this is going to be mainstream with all the doctors that's going to suggest this approach, or do you think they're going to say, well, in the last resort, we have that. Like for example, those who are dealing with depression, okay, when all the treatments, either CBT or DBT or whatever it is, has not worked, they try to work with ECT, which is the electric shock therapy. That helps them with the depression. So that's the last resort. So do you think that will be the case with psychedelic as well in the future?
I think change does come slowly, and there is a whole bunch of industry around the existing, certainly around the existing pharmacological solutions.
Mhm.
Um, and it becomes kind of a question for the doctors. Okay, you can prescribe an antidepressant, which may or may not work, where upwards of 75% are going to have sexual dysfunction. It's a pretty big side effect. Huge percent is going to have gastrointestinal issues. Some percentage is going to have increased suicidal ideation. But that's been the go-to. So you can do all that, or you could start with ketamine, which has a very low side effect profile. Um, doesn't have side effects for the most part that really persist after the psychedelic or the ketamine experience, and and see if that works. And I'm assuming that all of these medicines are, in the best case, are being done with people who are doing either talk therapy or with, it doesn't have to be a licensed therapist necessarily, but with a guide an integrator or a life coach or someone who knows what they're doing. Um, and then again, providing those practices of, okay, whatever it is, I'm starting to feel the feel the shift, feel the path of happiness. Well, what do I do? How do I keep this alive? How do I keep it going? Um, so I think all of that's important. But I see the future is incredibly positive in this space. There is so much technology here that can be used for so many things, because so many of our things revolve back on either repetitive thought patterns and behaviors, or on trauma that's happened to us, and our ability to forgive ourselves and to look at ourselves as loving, amazing humans is pretty powerful, and psychedelics can give us that look.
That's beautiful. So, for our listeners, where can they find you? Beside, you said like send 2 minutes and then happy dot.
Yeah, I'll take you through. So mattzeman.com, zemon.com.
Okay.
You'll find videos on different psychedelic medicines, information on my book, which is called Psychedelics for Everyone. Um, and you can reach me there. I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram regularly. Take 2 minutes, take the number 2minutes.org or .com, either one. Will get you to free activities that you can use. And then Happy, if you're in Florida, happy with 2 Y's.me is launching this month, and then going off nationwide from there. And that's again telehealth for ketamine.
Beautiful. Well, Matthew, that is all the time that we have for today's podcast. And I really appreciate you taking the time out of your very busy schedule to join us. And thank you again for participating and inspiring our many listeners with your incredible story and recommendation. Now, we hope that you've all enjoyed today's episode. And I'm also very excited about the many upcoming guests that we have scheduled for season 14 of the Happiness Journey podcast, filled with inspirational stories, just like the one that you listened to today. Now, here are some concluding words of wisdom. The meaning of life is just to exist. It's so straightforward and apparent. Nonetheless, everyone runs around in a hurry, as if they were required to do something greater than themselves. The aspirant true spiritual growth is judged by the degree to which he develops inner tranquility. Learn to connect with your inner self and see that everything in this world serves a reason. There are no errors or coincidences, purely synchronicity. All occurrences are benefits from which we might learn. So the next time you feel like racing towards anything, take a breather and learn to grasp the situation you're in. examining each reason why you allow yourself to keep running after your shadow. Separate yourself from the continual pressure of society to follow certain norms in order to please particular individuals. This is your own life journey, and not see anyone in the same way that you do. Now, you have power over the action you do on a daily basis. And if you expend too much energy on the wrong things, you will not be living your life. Stop enabling people to continuously poke at you in order to have you work them like a bunch of slaves. Take the bull by the horn and begin living your happy journey. My name is Dr. Dan Amzallag, and you may all keep pursuing your amazing journey in life.